Alright, so we're going to do our first product shot here. And now that all your preferences are set up, you obviously Maya is going to work the way that we're going to be working for this assignment. We're going to cover a little bit of background before we get into it. So this is going to be our project, is we're going to model these, more like this one here. Okay, just kind of this red box, and it's got these shiny chrome balls inside of it. And that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. So now we have to do a little bit of research as far as setup goes, because how do you get the nice look of a lot of these products that you might see. So we want to find a product like this is what we're trying to go for, is this nice clean background with our product kind of sitting here in the middle. Now in order to achieve something like this, we have to look for the right setup. So this is going back to traditional photography. This is the kind of stuff they would do in order to get that to look the way we would want that to look. So that's not obviously the same product, but this kind of product shot would give you that nice clean look that you see in that other one. Now there's other kinds of setups too. Sometimes you'll see these like white boards on the side, and that's meant just to kind of diffuse some of the lighting that's inside the scene. Okay, but you can see a lot of these same kind of thing, that just draped background. This one has a big reflective, glassy box around it. Actually, it looks like it's a storage container. Okay, different kinds of lighting. And then this one, I actually think I saw that one in here. Yeah, there's a stapler. I don't know if it's the same stapler. There's a stapler on there, and that could be how you could achieve that same kind of look. It's not the same one. Okay, obviously this one has a white background, the other one has a glass, and that would produce different looks too. This would just make it more reflective, but still on that white background. Okay, so this is the kind of look we're going for. We're going to be creating a setup similar to, not that one, similar to this kind of thing. Okay, and that will lend to creating a nice looking scene. Now in this one, you can see this one has 1, 2, 3 white spots here. That means that there are 3 lights in the scene. Okay, so we're seeing 3 lights shining down. That's what's lighting this thing up. We'll probably only use 2 just because it looks kind of noisy and messy, but we'll see what that looks like. All right. Also, we're not really going to see into the box like this. We'll probably get it from below and hitting it upward, so we won't even really have to model the inside of this box. Although for your own sanity, if that makes you happier, then go ahead and model the inside of the box. All right. So let's go head into Maya. And first thing we do is make a project. So we go to File, Project window. I'm going to say New. I'm going to make sure it's set to the 2520 folder, set to my work folder, and I'm just going to call this Sarcona. They call them lots of things: stress balls, exercise balls. So I'm just going to give it Sarcona Stress Balls, what I'll call this one. Okay, and then I'm going to go and just start to build my scene. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a cube. Oops. So this is going to be the box. So if you know how to build the box, you don't have to watch me step by step. We're just building the structure of the bottom portion of the box. Okay, and I want this to sit on the ground. Now I also want to keep my numbers even, but I'm not going to do that yet. Okay, so eventually I want to come in here and just make these like 4 and 3.5 and 9 or something. But for right now I'm just going to leave it. Okay, now I'm going to create the balls themselves. And looking at the picture, you can see that as they're sitting in this box, let me get a different angle here. Now there's different sizes, number one. You can see these ones are barely fitting in there. These ones are kind of cushioned around this thing. But these ones are filled up that entire box. So we have some leeway as far as how big they are and how much they're filling the box. Alright, so this is just the bottom portion of the box. This is not the top lid part. This is just the bottom portion. So I'm just going to make a ball and put it about where I would think that ball would go. And then I'm going to duplicate it and I just hit Control D, and I want to scoot this over here at the same spot. So if I just come over here to my Translate Z, that's the direction I moved it in. You can see I can populate that right there. Okay. Maybe I want these two to be a little bit bigger. Let me go to my top view and take a look. I'm going to scale it up a little bit. Oops. Right there. Okay. Because I wanted them to actually be really close and touching. I don't really want to see anything inside the box, so I'm just kind of, filling that up. Then I can take this box and just kind of size it to the appropriate dimensions. Okay. And these guys would be seated a bit further down inside the box, and then the lid would just come on top of it. Alright, so I'm looking at it and just analyzing. I think that's probably going to be good. Okay, so let me go through this now and just start to model the box a little bit more. So I'm just going to grab this face, and I'm going to go to our extrude tool. Offset of maybe 0.05. Nope. Let's say 0.2. Oops. And you see I accidentally grabbed this back face, so I'm going to hit undo until down here it says undo extrude, and then I'm just going to re-grab that top face. There we go. Go back to extrude. 0.25. Let's look at our source here. Okay, you can see it's pretty narrow. Okay, it's not really thick, so that's acceptable. All right, so now I'm going to extrude again. So I'm going to go back to extrude, and I'm going to push it down. And I'll come to about there. Okay. Now again, we're only going to see it from like this angle, so I don't need to even care about how far down I go. Okay, so that's good. Now if I was going to create some sort of padding in there, then I could obviously do that as well. But like I said, we're not going to be concerned about that. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like a wireframe. So now I want to create the lid, and the lid is essentially the same thing as the bottom, but it's shorter, so that's no big deal. So I can just duplicate this, and I'm going to rotate it around 90 degrees, and if I hold down the J key, there we go. And I can go to the move tool and move it up. And then I'm just going to go to my vertices and grab these guys and pull them down. Just until they're about, there. Then I can grab all of those vertices and maybe scoot them up a touch. Doesn't matter how you get there. That's what I want you to do, is just create those two shapes. Okay? So now if we just look at this one shape, I'll go to Isolate Select. That's what it looks like. Okay? Now we also have, if you look at this, I just wanted to see the bigger picture. There we go. If we look at these edges here, they look very soft. They don't look like they're hard and crisp. Okay? And the reason for this is that it's actually like fabric or material that's been wrapped around it. So I want to create that same kind of look on this thing. So I'm going to add bevels to this entire thing. So I'm just going to grab both of these objects and go to our hotkey and go to bevel. And I can come over here to where my bevel is and just adjust this fraction. Okay, 0.1 is going to be too much. I actually think 0.5 is probably going to be good, or maybe even 1. 1 might be a bit too much. All right, let's go with 0.75, and I'll say 2 segments. Okay, 2 segments will give me some nice rounding happening right here. All right, back to object mode. And there we go. There's our box. Okay. So now that we have the box built, we have the spheres in here. I want to take this sphere and just make it a little bit more rounded. Okay, I can hit 3 on these, and that will suffice. All right, if I go keep it in 1, you can see how the edges are just a little bit square. Let me go into isolate mode. Okay, so you can see some squareness around the edges. So by hitting 3, that will smooth that out and make it look much more spherical, much nicer. Okay. So now it's going to be a quick little thing we're going to create here, just this little latch piece. Okay. I debated about whether or not to even build it, but it's, you know, it'll take us like 2 seconds and it'll look much nicer. So we're going to go to our Create Polygon Plane tool. And I'm just going to hold down J and rotate this so it's at 90. Switch to my right view. And I'm just shaping this to be about the size of that little latch. Okay. No one's going to be measuring this with a ruler, so we have a little bit of freedom. I'm going to take my subdivisions down. Let's say like that. And then I'm just going to shape this into something that looks, you know, like a latch. It doesn't have to look exactly like their latch, because we're not trying to recreate that entire, you know, that exact shot. We're just trying to create some sort of latch on the end of this. And if it helps to look at, you know, different ones of these, you can see like this one doesn't even have a latch. But this one obviously does have a latch, and it's right there. So it's some sort of roundy kind of shape, right like that. And then this little latch is going to go on top of it. All right, so I'm just going to go and grab vertices here, here, there, and there, and I'm just going to scale these guys in. Okay, and these guys probably want to dip inward. Like that. And that's sufficient. That's, no one's going to, you know, check anything else out. That's all we need to do for the latch as far as the shape goes. Okay, and then I need to give it some thickness, so I'm just going to extrude it and pull it out, and then under offset I can offset this down some. There we go. Now it looks like a couple of my points are intersecting. Okay, you can see how these 2 points here are crossing each other. So I just want to grab, it doesn't matter which ones I'm grabbing, I just have to make sure that I grab them consistently. There we go. So I'm grabbing the ones that are actually overlapping a bit. There we go. And I'm just going to go to my scale tool and just scale those guys inward. Oops. And you can see over here I grabbed the wrong one. So I'm going to hit undo, grab the correct one, and do that again. There we go. Okay, so that looks pretty much like the latch, maybe a little bit flatter. Okay, and I'm going to go through and just add a little bevel to this. I'm just shift double clicking. Oops. So I've grabbed those two, this one and that one, all the way around. I'm going to add a bevel to it and just tighten that bevel up. So 0.1 for this one, because in here, go back to object mode, I'm going to hit 3 to smooth it out. And you'll see now that it looks more like a clasp, nice and smooth. Okay. And if I decided I wanted to, I could always come in and grab some of these points, grab some of these points, and pull them down a bit, and do the same thing on the bottom. Just pull those upward. But I want to really emphasize that indent right there. But I think that'll be nice just having that on there. Okay. Now there's also, if we look at that picture, and here's a tip inside of Google. If you go to search tools and you go to size and large, you'll pull up larger images. That way you can really get into, you know, a high-res image, so you can look at some of these pieces. And Wikipedia is just taking its time to load. There we go. Okay, so there's going to be you can see there's little crinkles here. We didn't do the crinkles, we just did, something that resembled it. There's a little ball right here, a little ball right there, and then a little nub right there. So we're going to create the little ball in the nub. So I'm just going to create a sphere, and I'm going to hold down C and middle drag along one of these edges. There we go. That just brings it right to about where that is. So there's one, so I can just duplicate it. And then again, I'm going to mirror it across the Z. So I'm just going to go to my Translate Z and make that negative, and there we go. Okay. So now I'm going to make a cylinder. And I'm going to hold down Shift and click this. And I'm going to use my alignment tools to align it to the midpoints in X, Y, and Z. Then I can grab it and shrink it and rotate it. Oops. Okay, so now it's centered perfectly where it needs to be. I'm going to come over here to the, actually I'll leave that alone. I'm just going to come over here to this edge. I'm just going to put a bevel on it. And I want to keep it pretty tight. 3 segments. I'm going to change the size of this again, just shrinking it down. I think it might still be a bit too big. There we go. That looks good. Okay, now it also had on here a little bit of a taper kind of sticking out. So I'm going to add that taper in here simply by going to the Insert Edge Loop tool. And just putting in a couple divisions and then just scaling that one out. So you'll see it's going to look like it has a taper on there. Obviously we just kind of added that in just to create a look to it. Okay, so there's a little latch that's right there. Now if we look at the top of this, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see from that view, so we'll switch and find a different picture. There we go. And you can see it's pretty much the same little piece here, except in this one we have this little latch that's going to fall down. All right, so that's cool. So that'll save us a little bit. So I'm just going to grab these, and not the nub. I'm going to duplicate it and just pull it straight up. Now if it does this, which I was expecting it might, then I would hit Control G to group it. I would go to our tool here, the Alt D one, and go to Center Pivot and pull this up. Okay, and then I can create a little latch that would fit there. Now if we look at that latch shape, it's basically going to be just this shape that comes around like this. So it's nothing really too fancy. So again, I'll go with a polygon plane. Oops. And I can use my alignment tools just to get it over there. And then my rotate tool to flatten it out. It looks like I gotta bring it a little bit forward. There we go. And I'm just gonna get it about that size. That's always my first step, is just sizing it roughly. And then I can go in here and change my subdivisions. Yeah, maybe something like that. Okay, I'm going to grab my vertices. And I'm trying to create a rounded shape on the bottom, so I'm going to grab these two and shrink them in and move them up. I'm going to grab these ones and just scale them in. Grab these ones and scale them in. So that pretty much looks like what that latch looked like in the other view. Okay, now the other one did have obviously a hole here for this one, so we'll create that as well. I'm trying to get out of this mode. There we go. So I'm going to go to my Insert Edge Loop tool. Come on. Play nice. There we go. And I'm going to drag one right about to the center of that. So I have basically like a little bullseye right where these ones are coming together. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this point right there. And I'm going to go under my tools here. And I don't think I added it to this one. I did not. So I'm going to have to go up to my mesh tools. And nope, I'm going to go to my edit mesh. And under vertex, there's one called Chamfer. Okay. And so what Chamfer is going to do, let me put this into isolate mode so you can see it, is Chamfer adds this little division right here. Okay. So then I can just take this and just resize that to how big I want that hole to be. Come on. There we go. And then I can just do a couple more adjustments to it just to make sure that it's nice and fitting. So right now it's square. I need this to not be square. I want this to be rounded. So I'm going to grab this and just basically just go across. So I'm going to go to my mesh tools, go to my multi-cut tool, and I want to put a point right here. Then I want to go there. I'm just visualizing. Yep, if I go there, this will be a four-sided on both sides, so that's cool. Oops. And I'm still not used to the multi-cut. I'm used to the old split polygon tool, so I always hit the wrong key to exit it. Okay, so I want to hit enter. I'm going to do the same thing in all corners. Okay, there we go. So now I can take these vertices that are now in the center and I can scale them out. Now this one doesn't look like it's lined up correctly. So I'm just going to manually just move that one just so it looks, you know, closer. We're not even really going to see it at this angle, so we don't even need to worry about it too much. Alright, so there we go. So there's that. I'm also going to take this edge here on top and I'm going to extrude the edge and push it in. Try that again. I want to grab this whole edge, extrude it, and there we go. Okay, so now that's the way it is in their in theirs, is that it has that little dip right there. Okay, and I'm also going to add maybe a bevel right here, a little bit tighter. One there. There we go. All right. So now I can just delete this face. Okay. And when I take this now and I go to extrude it, and I just say I'm going to increase the thickness to 0.1, too much, 0.01, that's probably good. Maybe we can go a tiny bit more, 0.02, yep, that looks good there. Now if I hit 3 on this, you'll see the shape that we get. If I turn this back on, you know, that's the look that we have right now. It's a little bit soft, so I want to harden it up a little bit more. Just keep that at 3. So I'm going to go to my edges, and I'm just going to grab these edges going around. I don't care about the ones that are inside it. You don't even really see those. Let me isolate it. Sometimes you know, the way it selects is selecting stuff on the inside. And so we just have to isolate it so that it doesn't do that. Now the other way we could do this is just holding on Shift and just marqueing these individual edges. Making sure we don't get any of these ones going across here, the small ones. We just want to get the big ones. There we go. So I think I got them all there. Put my bevel on. Double check it. So I'm just going down the line. Yep, that looks good. Okay. So now what's going to happen is that when I hit 3, it's not going to soften it as much. Now I think the circle is probably still a little bit too soft. So let me go into that. And I'm just going to double click this one, shift double click that one, and throw my bevel on it. There we go. So that looks pretty good the way that is. Okay, so now we have a latch, and we have our other thing. All right, so I need to open up the box. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. Let me just check something here in the texturing. All this is the same texture, so those all can be grouped together, and there's not going to be a problem. So I'm going to take this item and parent it. So I grab this first, shift click that one and parented. I'm going to grab these two spheres, shift click that, parent. I'm going to grab this stuff here. Get those three, shift click that and parent. Okay, and then I'm going to grab this here, shift click that, and I'm going to control G to group it. So I have those two things grouped together, and I'm going to rename this lid. Okay, and then the pivot for this guy, because right now the pivot's on the bottom, and I don't want that because I want to be able to rotate it open. The pivot for this is going to be back here. So I'm just going to hold down D and C, and middle click and drag right along that edge. Okay, so now when I rotate, you'll see I'm rotating this thing open. Now it's still a little bit off. I'm going to scoot it maybe a little bit further in. I'm going to hold down D and pull it down a bit. Maybe I'll move it onto this one. So hold down DC and put it on that edge. There we go. Now open it up. There we go. And now we don't have that weird gap that we had a minute ago. Okay, so that'll be cool. I can just pop this open when I'm ready for it. The bottom part's not going to move, so we can just ignore that. However, I do want to grab both of these anyway and still group them. Okay, and call this the bottom. That's just easy way to keep everything nice and organized. Okay, and the pivot for that can go right where it's at. Oops. I accidentally grabbed the ball, you see, because when I grab this and I hit up to grab the group, I accidentally grabbed that ball. So all I have to do to get the ball out of there is click the ball and hit Shift P, and now when I click on this and hit up, that ball is not going to get selected. Alright, so let me check the outliner just so you can see where we're at with this. I have a sphere, I have a group that's empty, there's no plus sign next to it, so I can just delete that. And then we have our lid, our bottom, and another sphere. So I'm going to take all four of these objects and group them, and this will be called our stress balls. Okay, so now that we have that, I can really do whatever I want. I can scale it, I can rotate it, and everything's going to move together nicely and happily. Okay, and that's what we want. And if I want to, I can grab this lid, and I can rotate it, and you'll see that the whole thing opens up like we would want to happen. Okay, so cool, that's wonderful. Now let's get on to modeling this backdrop here. All right. Now, if I were to render this right now, it would just look like horrible grayness, not even anywhere near what we would want for something like this kind of setup. So that's why we have to create this little backdrop, and it's very easy to do. Here's how I do it. There's several ways. Is create a plane, take off all the divisions, and you just make it big. Okay, it's like this. like that. That's good. And I'm going to grab this back edge and extrude it. And just pull it up and pull it back. Okay. And then I'm going to grab this edge right here and just add a bevel to it. And I'll add maybe 6 segments to the bevel. And I'll take that fraction and lower it down to maybe, let's see, 0.2 looks like it's a good value here. Maybe a nice little gradation right about there. If I make it too tight, then you'll definitely see this darkness happening here. So 0.2, 0.15 I think will actually be a good value. So I'm going to delete this face. I'm going to delete that face. I don't need to delete them, it just bothers me that they're there. Okay, so there's our backdrop. Wonderful. So this is everything that for this specific scene that we're going to be modeling. So it's a good time to save if you haven't done so already. So let's save the scene. Modeling done 0, 1. So I named it Sarcona StressBalls modeling done 0, 1. Okay, so now we can get on to the texturing portion of this, or the lighting portion of this. So I'm going to create a couple area lights. So lights, area lights. There we go, wonderful. And all my area lights that I'm going to use for these next couple projects are going to be the same thing. So I'm going to go to the attribute editor, and I'm going to make sure my decay rate is set to quadratic. We want to work with a linear workflow to make sure everything is nice and pretty. So we'll set that to quadratic. This will have to come up to maybe like 5,000. We'll find out. Under mental ray, I'm going to say use light shape and change my high samples to 1. And that should be good. Okay, so that's it. Quadratic, intensity goes crazy. Use light shape, rectangle 1. Good. So now I can hold this back. I'm going to hit T, and that way I can manipulate where this is pointing. Hold down V, snap it into there. Perfect. And this light will be coming from up here and back. Okay. So I know I'm going to need 2 of these, so I'm going to just hit Control D. And with T still on, I can just scoot it over, and you see now I have 2 lights. Okay. Now if I go and render this, it's not going to be in the linear workflow yet. Okay, just so you can see, I hit render. And it looks okay. I mean, it's nothing fancy. Now we have to switch this to mental ray, so we're actually rendering fancier. And again, just so you can see, I'll hit render again. There's not going to be a huge difference, with the exception of now it's reading that quadratic lighting, and we're getting shadows. Okay. So obviously the lights are going to have to come up, but I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to go to my render settings. I'm going to enable color management. I'm going to go to my display in my render view, go to color management, and turn on linear for the top number and sRGB for the bottom. So now I'll render again. And you'll see that's why I didn't want to adjust the lighting, because now we're at the spot where this is actually decent lighting. It may not be our end result, but at least we're brighter than we were just by turning on linear workflow. Okay. Now we want to pay attention to the shadows, how soft or hard they are, and we want to pay attention to what they look like as far as their direction. Okay. So if I have lights that are lower, like this, that will create longer shadows. If I have lights that are up like this, that will create shorter shadows. Okay, so I just have to pay attention to that kind of thing. Now to make them harder or softer, I would simply scale them. If I scale these down like this, that makes harder shadows. If I scale them up, that will make softer shadows. Okay, so you just have to be aware of those settings because you want to be able to control what the shadows are looking like. Okay, so now that it's scaled up that big, you can see we have shadows there, but they're not like super duper pronounced. Okay, and that's probably good. I'm going to up the lights a bit. And I don't like to have both lights at the same intensity because it kind of flattens the scene out. So I'm going to choose this one as my dominant light, or my key light, and I'll just add a 0 into this. So it's a 50,000 intensity light. And this might blow it out, but we'll find out. Yeah, it's blowing it out, so I'm just going to hit escape right now, and maybe put this down to 25,000. Now this is taking too long. This is 5 seconds just for this small region. So I'm going to change my test resolution. So options, test resolution, 50%. There we go. So now this is 4 seconds and we get the entire shot. Okay, and that's better for what we're getting. Now there's a bunch of grain in here. I don't care about the grain. So just ignore the grain for now. Okay. So let's go back to actually texturing this now. So all of these things here, this, actually I can just grab the base objects. Come on. I'm going to assign a Mia to them. So I'm going to go to my assign favorites, and there's the Mia. If you forgot to do that, you would just have to go back to assign new material, find the Mia, make sure we get the X passes, and we would right click and add it to our favorites. Okay. Now looking at this reference image, you can see that this is more of like a goldish color. So that's where I'm going to go with. So I'm going to go with my Mia. I'm going to say latches Mia. I'm going to go over to my presets and I'm going to choose, I'm going to start with copper. Okay, so I'm just going to replace this with copper. You'll see the coloring here, and you'll see that there's no gamma correction on these. So I need to do that. So I'm going to click on the color first. And what that does is it loads it into one of these banks. Okay, so that when I come in here, I find my gamma correct. There it is. If you didn't already add it, it's going to be under utilities, and again you can just right click and add it to favorites. So when I go in here and I click on this color, now that color value is loaded. Okay, and then I can just change this to my 454, load that into the color, and we're good. And then I can do the same thing for the reflection color. So you just hit the back button to get back. And if I want them to be the same color, I could just use this one, but I'm going to create a different one, just so I have the ability to adjust it. So do the 454, click that, and maybe darken it a bit. Okay, so now let's just look at that one item. We're zoomed in on it. Let's render it out and see what it looks like. Okay, not as golden yellow as these. You can see that the highlight in this one is actually like a whitey yellow kind of color, and these ones are actually coming out more of a brown. These ones are coming out more of a yellow. So I can adjust that, obviously. So let's go back. Also, if you look at my weight, when I did this preset for chrome or copper, my weight for my coloring is actually only a 0.1. So most of my color is actually coming from reflectivity. So I need to make sure that maybe this one is a bit brighter, maybe 0.5. I'm going to go into this color and maybe make it a little bit more on the yellow side. And I'm going to go to this color and maybe make this a little bit more on the white side, like that. Okay, so now let's go back and render it again. Now it's good to always save it, so I like to do these little saves, keep the image, and then render it so we can compare back and forth to see which one we like better. Okay, definitely looks a little bit lighter. Maybe we can take, let's see, this is the color here. I think I may have gone a little bit too far over to this side. Let's go back in the orange a bit. I'm going to sharpen up this glossiness some. I didn't keep the image that time. I'll remember to do that next time. I think that's probably good right there. I like the way that's looking. Okay, so for now, that's going to be satisfactory. Okay. So now let's go through and let's texture the box. Okay. Now looking at the image of the box, you can see there's some sort of texture on there. Go to back and go back to that first one that we saw. Even this one will probably work. And you see there's some sort of texture on the box, plus there's a picture on this as well. So there's a texture, sort of feel, a fabric look to this, and then there's also these texture on it, or the picture on it that looks like clouds or something. So what I did is I searched for Silk Tapestry Dragon, and I found this image, and I thought that would be a cool one to put on that box. So what I did was I just viewed the image, right-clicked, and I saved it. Now, because this is for school, you're able to do that. If this is a professional setting, you need to make your own texture, okay, which we're going to get into in a later assignment. But for now, we're just going to utilize an already existing item. So you can use that image there, or you can find something else that maybe you might like a little bit better to be that thing. Now, something like this would not work because it's folded and we have shadows and highlights in there. We really want to find something like this, oops, like that is just flat coloring. Now there is a bit of highlight in here and a bit of darkness there, but it's not so drastic that it's going to be noticeable. Okay. So Silk Tapestry Dragon, and that's what I pulled up. Okay, so I saved that to my source images folder right here. Okay, and there's actually a different one that I found, but same idea. Okay, oops. There we go. So again, I'm going to assign a Mia to this. And attribute editor, and this is going to be box Mia, and I'm going to assign my color. So I'm going to hit the swatch, I'm going to go to file, and I'm going to map that file in there. I'm going to copy it from here, paste it in there. Okay, so there's that image. So now if I hit 6 to see the image, we'll see that it just doesn't place the correct way. You can see it looks kind of squished here, and I'm seeing some of the bottom, bit of text in there, and it just doesn't look correct. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the face here. Actually, let's try this first. I always like to try different things when we're doing this. Let's go to Edit, Create UVs, and we'll do Automatic Mapping. Okay. So I just hit Project. And you'll see that the automatic mapping, it laid it out, but I'm still getting some squished areas. Okay, so I really want to be able to control this a bit better so that I don't get that squished areas. So I'm going to start at the top here. I'm going to grab this top piece, and because we have this bevel on here, I want to grab that too. So I grab the top face and I hit Shift greater than, and it'll grab that next row out. And that's what I want. Then I'm going to go into my Create UVs and do Planar Mapping. And from the Y direction, I can say project. Okay? And then I can just stretch this out this way and this way. And you can see how I can get that to lay on that box. Okay? So then I would do the same thing on the side. I would grab the side, hit Shift greater than, and I can do the other side at the same time. So I'm going to grab that side, shift click this side, Shift greater than, and I'll go to Create UVs, Planar Mapping, and this is going to be in the Z direction. So I would choose Z, project, and again I would scale it up here, scale it up there, and I'm trying to just match the size of it. I don't want this one to be really tiny or really big while the other one's that size. Actually, I think I like it at this bigger size. It looks more like the original. Okay, so if I want to adjust one of them, I can just go back into my channel box and click on the previous one and hit T, and then I can adjust that. Okay, so I'm going to go to faces here, grab this one, shift click that one, shift greater than, and create UVs, planar mapping. This is going to be in the X direction. And again, I'll stretch it out here, stretch it out here, and try to get these sizes to match better. There we go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. All right, and that's the outside of the box. Now if I click on this group, remember we have the lid group, so I just click on it and hit up, and I rotate this, you'll see that the inside of this has not been done. Okay? Now if we look at the inside of one of these, the inside of this one is just a flat piece of paper. We have some texture here, some texture here, some texture along this, but the flat piece here is just a piece of paper. Okay? So I'm just going to flatten this again. I'm going to actually click the lid and isolate it so I can see what the other side looks like. And I'm just going to go through and just grab all of these and do that again. I'm going to grab these ones on the inside. I'm going to go to Planar Mapping. I'm going to say this is in the X direction because that's the direction it's pointing. Okay, see this red arrow? That's the X direction, so that's what I want to do. And this doesn't have to be 100% accurate. What we're doing is just trying to make it look realistic. So, there we go. That's good. So grab this face, that face, shift greater than, planar map, Z direction. Oops, I think I grabbed that back face on accident. That's no big deal because, you know, it could be a little bit different. So that's good. I will grab this one because I'm going to put a texture on that as well. Shift greater than, planar mapping, Y direction, project. There we go. Okay. I'm also going to, let me see my image here real quick. Yeah, you can see this one actually has watermarks on it, so I'm going to have to remove those watermarks before I render it, or find a different image that works too. I think actually I'm just going to go grab that other image that I saw. Where's my dragons? I'm just going to save this into my, maybe it will work. There we go, finally saved. And then I'm going to go and replace it. So I'm just going to go to the attribute editor for that box, click on this, and reload in my dragon pattern. Okay, now you can see that there is some graininess happening here. Okay, I'm going to go back to my file, and under filter type I'm going to turn quadratic off, and that will sharpen it up some. Now if I'm still really grainy, you know, and it's not working out the way I want it to, I can still adjust those UVs. If I go to the UV texture editor, here's all my UVs just kind of sitting here. Now all of them except for this border here, I haven't done it yet, I wanted to save that one. This is the border going around it. Okay, so if I right click and go to UV, I can marquee this little border here and say select shell and move it, and you can see how I can adjust what those ones look like. So I'm just going to set those off to the side for now, just out of this little area. Then I'm going to grab all of these and I can scale them up. Oops. There we go. And you can see how they're all going to allow that to have more texture fitting inside of this image. Okay, and I can do it individually too. If I grab this face and I go to select, convert selection to UVs, and then I go to select shell. Now I'm adjusting the UVs on that specific item. Okay, now when you look at a set of UVs inside here, inside the UV editor, they should look like the same kind of shape. Like this shape inside here shouldn't be like this because that's more square, this is more rectangle. Okay, and that's why it's stretching out. So it should match that pretty good to what's out there. Okay, we did all these manually, so it's not going to be that way for all of them. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just kind of organize these on this sheet just so I can see where everything is. So I'm going to go to Image, dim the image so I don't see it, and I'm just going to click on one of these and go to Select Shell, and then scoot it off to, away from everything else. Click on a UV, select Shell, and just scoot it off. Click, select Shell, I can just hit G and scoot it off. Click, hit G, scoot it off. Some of these are on top of each other, so that's why I'm clicking and not marqueing. Okay. So that is the all the UVs, all the pieces kind of laid out. Now I could assign or merge some of these things together, and that would make life a little bit easier. So if I look at this, these edges here, this edge right there, okay, shares UVs from this side and that side. Okay, so this edge and that edge, if you look inside my UV texture editor, you can see that when I clicked on that edge, this edge lit up and that edge lit up. Okay, well I can go in here and say move and sew, that's what this button is for, or under polygons there's a move and sew somewhere in here. I can click that and you see how it moves it and sews those two edges together. Okay, now they're different sizes, so that's why it didn't work exactly the way it should. So I'm going to go to the UVs for this. I'm going to select the shell and I'm going to scoot this over here. I'm going to grab this guy, select the shell, scoot him over here, and I'm going to rotate him using this thing. Okay, and you'll see that this is the edge they share, and obviously it's not the same size because when I sized these they were a bit different. Okay, so I can just shrink this down until it fits that size closer. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate because it's fabric that's wrapping around it. Okay, and then if I go to the edge and click on it, there we go. If I move and sew that, you'll see how it attaches. Now it's actually attaching it the other way. So I'm going to go to the UVs for this, or sorry for this, select the shell, and I'm going to flip it horizontally or vertically. So I go to this flip tool like that. Now you didn't see anything happen, but it flipped it. So now when I go to edge and click here and go to move and sew, they just attach. That's what we want. Okay, so I could do that for several other pieces too. So I can just go in here and find an edge. Let's say this edge. There it is. Okay, so that edge is shared with this edge. So I can go and grab UVs for this, move it down, size it accordingly. Now this is only important for areas that are going to be seen. If we're not going to see it, it's not really going to matter. Okay, it'll just add a little bit more realism to some of these things that allows it to blend nicely. So I go to the edge and you can see that I clicked on one and it highlights both. That means that they're a shared edge. I merge them and there we go. I can also come in here and you can see that you have these little triangles. I'm going to merge those too. Come on. There we go. Okay. Now if I want to see what's going to go here, I can just click this edge and I see that this edge wants to combine with that one. Well, I'm not going to let that happen because then it's going to skew that and it won't look correct. I want to keep these things as square as possible. Okay, so let me go to this edge and we'll see what's going to connect here, and that's going to be this guy. So we'll grab him, move him down, I'll rotate him using the rotator, I'll scale him into position, I'll go to the edge, click, move and sew. There we go. There's no overlap, so I don't need to worry about flipping it at all. If there was overlap, then I would worry about flipping. There we go. Okay, now let's see what's going to go up here. And that would be this big piece. So let me grab the UVs for that. I'll rotate it around. Scale it into position. I'll grab that shared edge. Moving so. Oops. And when I moved and sewed this one, it did flip. Okay. You can see that it drastically changed the position. So I'm going to go to the UVs for it. Select the shell. And then I'm going to go flip horizontally. And then go back to my edge. And move and sew that. And we're good. Okay. And I just want to come in here to these and just tidy those corners up. So I'm just moving and sewing those together. You have to visualize it like what would this box look like if you unwrapped it, if you cut it apart and flatten it out. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want to do for that. So I'm just going to take that and now put that on the inside of this. Let's say there. And then for these other pieces, let me select their shell. I'm just going to pull these in and just put these somewhere inside this box. Okay, I don't want them all to be overlapping. I want them to look like, you know, this is one solid material. Shrink him down a bit. Okay, and then this is that rim that's going around. And the rim, I don't even think I really care about the rim right now because I think it's going to be good the way it is. There we go. So if there's some overlap here, that's fine. I just don't want it to be, you know, crazy looking. All right. So that should be good there. All right. Now I know what you're probably going to be thinking, holy cow, that was a lot of work just to get the texture to look nice on here. But that texture is going to pay off. You can see how this texture is bleeding over onto this. That's what we did when we sewed stuff together. You can see that there's no bleeding right here. That's fine because there wouldn't be. Because if this was a piece of paper, how would it do that? And the same thing here and the same thing there. But all these edges there to there, we are getting that. Okay. So now we don't have to do that again for the other half. What I can do is I can take this, shift click that, and say Mesh, Transfer Attributes. And I just have to make sure I go to the option box and click Component. And now you'll see that it transfers the attributes to this one. Now they are a little stretched out because they're a different size. That's no big deal. Because we can go back into the UV Texture Editor. And let's see, this face here is right there. And you can see it's pretty narrow. So I just need to come into these faces here and here. And just make those taller. Like that. And the same thing here and there. Just make these taller. Okay, I'm also going to go to Select Shell, and I will do some overlap here just because I want, you know, that to be inside that box. There we go. All right, so there's our coloring on there. So now let's go through and add a little bit more adjustments to these materials. So the reflectivity, looking at this, there's not a lot of reflectivity to it. There is some specular in there. Okay, so any reflectivity is going to need to be diffused. So I'm going to take this glossiness down to maybe 0.1 and the reflectivity maybe to 0.2. Okay, that'll give us a really soft look. Glossy samples are going to come to 1. Anytime we take the glossy below 1, we set that glossy samples to 1. I also want to do a bump map. So I'm going to go to bump map. I'm going to go to standard bump. And I'm going to add a cloth to this. So there's a cloth bump. And you'll see it's going to look horrible here. But once I take this and lower the value, 0.05 should be good. Go to my cloth, go to my top arrow here, my input connections. and I start increasing this value to maybe like 300 by 300, what we're going to get is this nice little subtle pattern, and it's going to be hard to see in the video possibly, but you'll see this little bumpy pattern of where this looks like it might be actually some sort of material that's been used to make this thing. Okay, so now that all that's situated, I'm going to grab everything here and I'm going to delete the history. Okay, or edit, delete by type history, or your shelf history. Okay, so there's our stuff still there. So now I can take this, hit the up arrow, and rotate the box open. Okay, now like I said, I wanted to create a different texture here, so I actually did download this. Here it is, this crinkly paper. This was again another texture that I found, so I'm going to assign that crinkly paper to this face. So I'm going to click the face and hit Shift greater than. Go to my materials, crinkly paper, there we go. And under the map for the color, I'm going to add my file. Oops, there's my crinkles. Yeah, I lowered it in here, so there's that. So let me just paste this here. Crinkles. There we go. And if I need to, I can readjust those UVs on there. So if I just grab that face again, convert it to UVs, select the shell. Oops. I can scale just that one piece up to fit more of that texture inside of it. There we go. Okay, so that's good. All right, so now let's texture these guys. Oops. Make sure we just grab those. Assign a Mia. Chrome balls underscore Mia. Let's save our project too, just in case we get some crashing happening. And we'll click on the, oops, not that. I'm going to click on the presets and just choose Chrome from this list. Okay. So now we have it. We have Chrome on the spheres. We have, our background's not textured yet, so let's add a little Mia to that. We'll call this background Mia. We want to keep it white, so we'll make it white. We want to take reflectivity off. Not all the way off. I like to keep it, maybe at 0.1, and keep the glossiness at 0.1 also. And again, glossy samples to 1. Alright, so now we have textured everything. So we'll save it again. We'll hit the render button now, and we'll see where we're at. Your goal is to kind of set these things up pretty quickly so that you can come back and start tweaking some of the looks of it. Okay, so overall that looks pretty decent. Okay, I'm not fully happy with this blackness happening on these. Okay, there's also some blackness happening up here that I'm not excited about. So I'm going to do a couple things. One thing I want to do is the blackness on the lid. That could be fixed by just moving one of these lights. So if I just took this light and just pulled it down like that, then I wouldn't get that blackness because now I'm shooting light right into the lid. Okay, that could have some weird shadowing effects, but we'll see. Now the blackness for these, why we were getting blackness happening on there, is because if we look out here into nowhere land, way out here, there is blackness. So it's going to reflect that blackness into those spheres. So what I can do is just create a polygon sphere way out here. And then on the sphere, I'm going to assign a surface shader. Now, surface shader allows me to just add a material that will do basically lights itself. So I'm going to call this BG sphere. And on this BG sphere, I'm going to go to Out Color and map a gamma, because I'm going to add a texture to it. and I'm going to map to this value, I'm going to find something that I think would work. And probably something like let's try just something like fractal. Okay. I don't want this much noise in there though. That's like way too many value changes. So, oops. So I'm going to lower this, and I'm going to play with these settings until we get something that's more like that. Okay. So I want to have some blacks in here, but I don't want it to be crazy. Okay. I can also come down to my color balance and just pull this color gain to adjust the brightness. So if I decide that it's too bright, I can just pull it down. So I'm just going to start off with something like that. Kind of gray with these little black blobs inside there, or gray blobs. So let me click on my scene and hit F so I can get right into it. Alright, so now let's take a look and see what we're looking at. Okay, so now we're not dealing with any of that. You'll see our paper is actually really reflective. I have to take care of that. I think that might be a little bit too harsh on there, so we can adjust that as well. So let's adjust our paper. I just click the back of this, go to the crinkly paper, and just pull these settings again down. I'm also going to go to the standard bump and maybe put a bump on that as well. And I'm just going to use that same file, that same crinkles. I'll take the filter type off. And I think I want to take my test resolution back to render settings. That way I get the full size and I can see it obviously a bit better. Okay, now I'm still getting some sort of darkness here. That's coming from the lid. So I probably want to just hit escape and just rotate this lid back a little bit more. So I click it, hit the up arrow, and rotate the lid back a bit further. And it's still catching it a little bit, but I think it's better than it was before. Okay, and you can also see we're picking up some of these little gray splotches that are way in the distance. Okay, so zoom way out. Yeah, I'm going to make it mostly this gray color here. So just by adjusting the settings, I get rid of a lot of that and just have some gray in there. Yeah, that's looking a bit better. Okay, now the chrome here is really kind of, I'm hitting escape trying to get this, is really blaring that out. I want to take a look at that reflection and see what the reflection settings are. You'll see that the glossy samples are set to 0. I really want that set to at least 1 and pull this glossiness up. Okay, and then maybe I'll want to look at that and see if that gives me a better look of chrome opposed to what we just saw. So it definitely looks like my reflections are a bit crisper doing that. And it makes sense because I just turned my glossiness back up. I'll also take my roughness maybe down a bit. take this color back down to black. And again, it's just a matter of playing. You'll start to understand what things to change and what things not to change as you play with them more. Okay, so not a huge change in that case, but that's fine. Alright, so what I want to do too is to this reflection color, I have a couple other source images here. I have this scratches texture. I want to put that on that reflection color. So this is just one, again, I found on CG Textures that I wanted to use. I'm going to take the filter type off. And I'm going to go to my hypershade. And I'm going to map out that chrome balls. So I'm going to go to chrome balls and click the graph button, this input-output connections. And I'm going to middle drag this file onto chrome balls and go down to standard bump. Okay. Now this will give me a little bit of bump on there, a little bit of, scratches on it. So let me lower this to 0.2. I may need to go negative 0.2, I'm thinking on this, yes. Okay. So now if we look at this, I'm going to save it and render it again. What we should have is these are going to look a lot more scuffed up. Okay, now it's hard to see because our render settings are down, so I think at this point I'm just going to take them up. So I just go to the render settings, I'm going to pull my samples up to 2 and just do a preview of this. Now I'm probably going to take it down right after that just so I know it's good, but I want to see what it looks like because right now it's a little bit hard to see. Alright, so in this case, it looks like the scratches are here, but they're actually scratching out. So it looks more like, some crud is on there. So this negative 0.2 on the bump should actually be a 0.2. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to take this glossiness down a touch, maybe 0.9 or so. And say that... yeah, let's just leave it like that. Let's try it one thing at a time. Alright, so we'll see what this is going to look like after it's done. Alright, there we go. So now that they're done, it definitely looks a lot better than it was looking back here. It was hard to see that chrominess, and now it looks like they're, a bit scuffed up, a little bit rough, which is what we were after there. Alright, so that's cool. I'm just going to verify some of these other settings before we move on. This is set to 1 there, which is good. This one's set to 1. Let's get there. Okay. So that should be good. So everything in the scene is set. And I'm just going to take this back down to maybe 0.15, just so it's a little bit quicker than the next thing we're going to do. Alright, so now we're ready to render this out. So I'm going to save this as texturing done. Okay, so now that that's done, now we can actually render this thing out. And for this, rendering a still, so I just want to get a good angle, something like that. I'm going to hit the blue render ball here so we can see this. And I want to kind of fill the frame. I don't want it to be like right up against it, but I want to get pretty close. I also want to click on this camera button and come over here and adjust this focal length. So if I set this to 10, just so you can see what it's going to do, it's going to really, distort this and create more of an artistic look to this. I really want to take this and maybe make it like 60. Just kind of flatten it out a little bit. Okay, looks more square, looks more rigid than it did at 35. Okay, so that looks pretty cool the way it is right there. Okay, so that's good. I like the framing. I like everything about this shot. So I'm just going to grab my camera, and under View, I'm going to say Bookmarks, Edit. And this allows you to save your camera view. So I'm going to say Render Spot. Hit Enter. And so now if I accidentally mess it up, I can just go to View, Bookmarks, Render Spot, and it takes me right back to where it was. Okay, so that's what we want. So I'm going to go to my render settings, and I'm going to turn on Final Gather. I'm going to set it to 50, 0.5, and 50. And what this is going to do is some of these dark areas like this, it'll actually bounce some light into that area. So that's what we want there. Okay. Quality we'll set to 2 eventually. We're not going to do that yet. Features, we're going to turn on Ambient Occlusion. Under Passes, we're going to click on this button here on the far right. And we're going to render out a couple passes. Number 1, camera depth. We want that. And we're also going to render out Ambient Occlusion, which is up here. So we just control click that guy. And that should be it for now. So create and close. The 2 passes are there. Oops. I accidentally had this thing down here. Let me just erase that. So I can go Ambient Occlusion and camera depth. There we go. So it just says AO and depth. I'm going to associate those with our render layer. And I'm going to double click AO because I want to change some of these settings. I want to say use local settings. I'm going to pull this value up to 128 for the rays. I'm going to take my spread and make it, let's say 0.8. And take the max distance up to, let's say 2. Okay, so we'll close that. Let me double click depth. Just verify that that's all set up good. It is. And so then I'm going to render it. Okay, and I want this to render to an EXR before I go. So I'm just going to go to the Common tab, and I'm going to set this to right here to Open EXR. There we go. And that should be good. So I'm just going to go to my quality, crank this up, save my scene, and then hit the render button. And what this is going to do is it's going to render this out and save this image into our temp folder. Not this one, but the other one. That one. Temp folder. And we'll have an EXR. There it is right there coming out. This is our previous one, which was an if. The EXR is going to have all of our lighting information, plus it's going to have some other stuff that we can use inside of Nuke. Alright, so that took 13 minutes for that one frame to render out. I mean, it looks pretty nice. I like the way that the shadows are touching. The scratches on the ball are pretty cool. I could adjust the texture a little bit more on these if I wanted to, or even on some of this stuff. But I think for now we're good. Okay, so the image is saved. It's in our temp folder. So I just want to go in here and just make a copy so it doesn't get overwritten and call this Sarcona Stress Balls. Okay, so now I'm going to go into Nuke. And once we're inside Nuke, then I can go through and do something with those passes that we rendered out. Alright, so sometimes Nuke will ask you, do you want to restore? And obviously if you do, then just hit yes, but in this case I don't, so I'm going to hit no. And that's basically Nuke crashed the last time it was open, so it's saying do you want to restore that last save, so I said no. So I'm going to click down here first, and then hit S, and I'm going to set my project. So I'm going to go to my folder, and I'm going to go to, delete that, I'm going to go to my 2520 folder, go to Work, and just click on these stress balls and say Open. Okay, and that's where my project directory is for Nuke, so it knows where all my stuff is. Okay, so then I can give this a name and call this StressBalls, and that will rename my file up here. So now when I hit save, it'll save that name. And then I'm just going to click down into this and hit R for read. I'm going to go back. So I can get to my 2520, go to my work, go to my Sarcona, go to my images, go to my temp, and there's my Sarcona stress balls that I just saved out. Okay, so if I hit 1 while clicking that, you'll see there's the image. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to use those passes that we had. So if I come over here and I look at it, here's the AO, and that looks pretty good. If your AO isn't, looking like this, you may want to adjust it. Adjust the there. AO. Adjusting things like the spread will control how far this is spreading out from the surface, and then the max distance is how far from this object it's going to start to calculate. Now, seeing that ambient occlusion, I think my object might be floating just a hair above my ground. So I just want to take a look at that and see, and of course it is floating a hair above the ground. So I'm going to push this up a bit, and I'll just re-render it after I'm done. Everything else I can still do inside Nuke. Okay? So I'll do this inside Nuke, I'll re-render it out of Maya, and then just reload the new one, and it'll update. Here it doesn't look so bad. I mean, there's still a little bit of shadow there, and that might be more prevalent after we're done, but we'll see. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is I want to shuffle out some stuff. So I'm going to hit the Tab key and go to Shuffle. Okay, I'm going to shuffle out the ambient occlusion. Okay, I'm going to rename this AO_shuffle. So there it is. Then I'm going to click off of it. I'm going to hit Tab, and I'm going to, no, actually I don't need to. That's good. So I just need the AO shuffle. So I'm going to merge this back into here. So I'm going to click the AO, hit M for merge, and drag the B onto that. Okay? And then I'm going to go to the process here, the operation, and change this to multiply. Alright? So if I click the merge and hit D to deselect it, or to disable it, you can see the effect of it. Alright? We have much more realistic look because now we have this little shadow here, we have a nice little shadow there, and in the corners, around the ball areas, and then obviously on the bottom that one will go away after we're done. Okay? Or it'll be minimized. Alright, so that's pretty cool, and we always want to do an ambient occlusion because it gives us that look. And if we need to adjust it, we can take this mix and just adjust the mix, and you can see what that's going to do is just lighten the effect of that. Okay, for now I actually like how dark it is, so I'm going to leave it the way it is. The next thing I want to do is add depth of field. Okay, and this may not have a huge effect on this specific scene, but we'll see. So I'm going to click on the merge, I'm going to hit Tab and go to Z defocus. Okay, first thing I need to do is choose my depth channel. And my depth channel is actually going to be this CamZ depth perspective. Okay, so let's go and look at that real quick. I'm going to jump back to my first one and hit 1 and choose CamZ depth perspective. As I move my mouse over this, you can see these red numbers are updating. Okay, and so that's going to be my depth, and that's what I want to adjust. So that's good. So I can go back to my Z defocus and hit 1. I'm going to move my focus point onto the corner of this, right about there, and you can see that there is a definite effect that we're getting. You can see how the top of this is all fuzzy, and the front of this is clearly in focus. I don't want that big of an effect on that. I'm also going to change my operation, or my math here. My math should be set to direct, okay? And that way it's actually reading the depth and not trying to do any funny math, and it actually gives you a smoother result. Alright, so I'd set that to direct, cool. And now I can start to tweak some of my settings. If I want to look at this and see what's in focus, what's not, I can change my output to focal plane setup. And right now, this little dot that I have here, that's what's in focus. Okay, so I change that back to result. You'll see that's what's in focus here. And then I can also adjust, switch this back, my depth of field, and that will also increase what's in focus too. Okay. Typically you don't need to go with that because this is a pretty quick operation, but sometimes it helps to visualize what's in focus and what's not by seeing that thing. Now even though this depth of field stopped at 1, that doesn't mean I couldn't type in 5 or 10 to get a better depth of field result on there. Okay, I'm also going to take down the size of these blurs. I do want a little bit of softness in this back corner maybe, but not as much as I had. All right, I think that's probably sufficient. All right, so I'm going to click on the Z to focus and just hit D to disable it, and I can see the effect, and I'm liking it. Okay, I can also move this around and, you know, put something else in focus. And adjust how that whole thing is coming off. Okay, just so you can see the effect a little bit more drastic. There we go. So I pop this back here, and now that's going to be in focus. And then these other objects are going to be out of focus. Okay, and this actually, the point itself can't be animated, but this focus plane, could be animated. Oops. So I'm just going to keep it right there. That's our main object. And we'll knock this maximum down to, let's say 3, maybe 3.5. Alright, so that looks good there. So I'm happy with the way that turned out. Now what I also want to do is I want to just, again, take a look at that and see. Yep, it's definitely looking good. My final thing I want to do is just add a little vignette to this, just to kind of help bring this image into focus. So I'm going to add a merge to this. And what I want to do is I want to merge this item back onto itself. So the A is going to go here. I'm going to hold the control key, pull out a little handlebar, or a little dot, and then the B is also going to go there. Okay? And this is just going to be set to multiply. Alright, I can't see anything happening yet because my viewer isn't connected, so I'm going to click on the merge, hit 1. There we go. That's our effect. And what I want to do is then drop a roto shape off to the side. So I'm going to click off into nowhere and hit O for roto. Remember, keep a list of all these hotkeys. This mask feature, this little arrow on the far right of this multiply, I'm going to drag onto the roto. And then I can go through, I'm in my roto tool, and I can just create a little shape. Okay? So what I want to do is create this little, oops, go back to that. Create a little circle at the center. There it is. And then I want to drag, it might be hard to see on that one, I want to drag these little handlebars out, all the way past the edge. There we go. Okay, now it's backwards because I want the edges to be darker and the center to be lighter. So I just come over to my Bezier and I invert this. And now we have that roto taking effect. So if I take this multiply and I disable it, you can see the effect of having that on there. It really helps kind of smooth this out. Now make sure your roto is looking nice. Sometimes people have a tendency to not take this all the way to the edge. You know, when you start to get these funky little shapes inside here. So definitely don't want that to happen. So I'm just pulling it out. Alright, so that looks good. So our last command we're going to do here is a write. So we just click on that merge because that's the last one in our tree. We hit W, and then we tell this where we want it to go. So I'm going to just put it into my images folder and say Sarcona final StressBalls final dot TIF. Okay, and then I just hit render. It says 1:1, yep. And there we go. So now this is fully rendered out right there. So you would turn in your entire project folder into the server and have that little image there as well. Now remember I said I needed to re-render that thing, so all I have to do now is just go back into Maya and re-render this. And when it's done, I come back into Nuke. I go to this image, I go to this folder, and I find my new image, and then everything else in this chain would update. Okay, so I didn't have to worry about doing anything after that. Go back to my right after it's been updated, and I render it back out, and it's good. All right, so I'm just going to let that happen, and that's the stress balls assignment. Now make sure you save all your work, because we're going to be working on the same scene and adding stuff to that scene and removing the stress balls just so we can kind of reuse some of our assets. Okay, so wonderful, great job, keep it moving.